I'm not sure if I can give you some positive examples of democracy. And I decided to give you 2 examples from our history and using the direct democracy in an instrumental way by the politicians. 2 different cases in 2 political regimes. The first one, I know it was some times ago, but the communists, when they struggled for power in Poland after the Second World War, they organized a referendum using the questions that were prepared to force all the positive answers. For example, I'll give you just one example of such a question. It was after the Second World War, and the question was, are you for the consolidation of Polish borders? So how can you vote against? They think they were going to force the voters to vote yes for all these questions. But surprisingly, the voters, they knew what for the communists are organizing such a referendum. The communists were trying to show that, okay, we have full support of the nation. Look at the referendum, look at the results. Everybody are voting for at all these questions. But the voters start to vote no, because they knew that it's not the issue is not about the borders. The issue was not about the reforms. The issue was about supporting the communism in Poland or being against. So what the communists did, they had to falsify the results of the referendum. Now we know the real scores, real results. So this example is not too much optimistic about using the referendum by the politicians, but we can be more optimistic about the voters, because they were not manipulated. And the second example comes from the modern times. It comes from 2015. The Polish president, fighting for re-election after the first turn of the presidential elections, he announced the referendum using the same technique. He used 3 questions to attract the voters. So the reason for the referendum was not about helping a nation resolving any problems or issues. It was just for attracting voters to win the second turn of the elections. It was, again, instrumental using of a direct democracy, not for solving problems, but attracting voters in the interest of this special situation. And what was the results? What were the results? The turnout in this referendum was about 8%. 8%. So the voters, again, the president thought I can manipulate them, but they understand what he's doing. So this is this is again a question, this is again the example, a case, the politicians trying to use the direct democracy for their purposes, for their political purposes, and the optimistic thing, the voters are not such stupid as they thought. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's good. There is some cause for optimism. I was a little worried. Joe Matthews, one of the conference organizers, has been trying to get me here for years and years to talk about direct democracy, and then I moderate a panel where it's all negative about direct democracy, Joe is never going to invite me again. So I'm glad that there was some positive there. Dr. Lowe.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to distinguish between two realms of politics. There's big P, power, procedural, formal politics. And very often in the Southeast Asia, East Asian context, this kind of politics is dominated by the political elites. They are professional politicians. They have lobbyists. They have a lot of money. They own media empires. They don't do direct democracy. And then there's a small p politics, which is people-oriented, participatory, and you have a chance if you go into this kind of politics. You can make a difference. And if you want to talk about direct politics, this should be the realm that you are targeting, not big P politics. Okay, so this is the context that I'm talking about. Why these two types of politics? East Asia, Southeast Asia, fastest growing region throughout the world. Economies have grown, not just China that you hear about or India, everyone, Korea, my country, Singapore, everywhere. Big middle class consolidated itself. People's livelihoods have improved considerably. Governments of this sort have legitimacy, but they disallow participation. So our role has been to try to create an autonomous public sphere which is out of their reach, out of the reach of the political elites, out of the reach of the big business, out of the reach of religious elites, where we can then begin to steer things. So this is one of our goals, as it were. Our goals is direct democracy by creating an autonomous public sphere which we can direct, we can steer, we can actually push for. And there, we have discovered that, I suppose this is best epitomized by the success of the People's Power Revolution in the Philippines. It's not through parliamentary process, but actually they encountered that. In Guangzhou, 1980s and all that, exactly the same thing. In Malaysia, we use this public sphere, which is not controlled by them, to push for free and fair elections. So you can use a whole variety. And of course, the Suharto regime, which had ruled for 30-odd years in Indonesia, they were also toppled through this political process, through the role of students, activists and all that, pushing for this. And very often, this allows for too much violence to occur. And in a sense, when I was talking about Myanmar, this was also what was happening. Of course, the regime can control this realm as well. So that's why this autonomous public sphere is extremely important. You can consolidate yourself. And the last point I want to make is that, where does it take us then? We have discovered actually local government is very important. It's the realm that is contested by both types of politics. Big P power politics and small p politics. And there, you can actually have a chance to push your agenda, because if you're all the time in this autonomous public sphere, you're going nowhere. You have good debates, you can gauge people's concerns and all that, but you're not going to be able to move your political system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Consejero Velázquez.
Gracias. La experiencia histórica no permite una sola respuesta sobre la democracia directa o los diferentes mecanismos de democracia directa que se han conocido y están en práctica en nuestro tiempo o lo han sido en el pasado. De modo que exige una forma de acercarse a ellos matizada y desde varios ángulos. Por un lado, los mecanismos de democracia directa pueden ser, y en muchos casos lo son, un complemento muy benéfico para la democracia en general. Puede tener efectos virtuosos sobre la democracia representativa. Pero hay que subrayar, al menos desde mi punto de vista, que la democracia directa no puede sustituir a la democracia representativa. Puede complementarla, puede beneficiarla, puede enriquecerla. Sin embargo, bajo ciertas condiciones, estos efectos virtuosos sobre la democracia representativa pueden dar lugar a efectos contrarios. En general, los mecanismos de democracia representativa tienen la virtud de ampliar los canales para que los ciudadanos influyan en los asuntos públicos. Por ejemplo, pueden fortalecer la exigencia de rendición de cuentas por parte de los gobernantes. Pueden propiciar una participación más activa que haga más eficaz la vida democrática. Estos mecanismos también pueden influir en la agenda pública, de modo que los gobiernos, los parlamentos, le presten atención a temas que pueden importarle mucho a la sociedad y que no están recibiendo la atención debida. En general, los mecanismos de democracia directa pueden hacer más comprensivos los asuntos públicos, y esto sin duda es bueno para la democracia. Sin embargo, hay que considerar algunas condiciones determinantes, podríamos decir críticas, para que los mecanismos de democracia directa realmente aporten vigor, fuerza a la vida democrática. Primero, se requiere un Estado de Derecho consolidado, un régimen democrático con pesos y contrapesos efectivos, con instituciones sólidas, como por ejemplo un poder legislativo, un parlamento que ejerza control sobre las acciones del poder ejecutivo, un poder judicial independiente y fuerte que controle la constitucionalidad de las acciones de los otros poderes. Podemos decir entonces que si las democracias no son sólidas, con una efectiva división de poderes y con una participación ciudadana libre y activa, bien informada, los mecanismos de democracia directa podrían tener un efecto contrario. Podrían debilitar a las instituciones democráticas, convertirse en instrumentos de liderazgos autoritarios para dar más poder a los que ya lo tienen. Y por lo tanto podrían ir en contra de un principio esencial de la democracia, que es la distribución del poder político entre los poderes de la República y también dándole poder a los ciudadanos. Un liderazgo autoritario, y eso lo demuestran muchas experiencias históricas, puede invocar al pueblo con la intención de atropellar las instituciones del sistema democrático. Por ejemplo, puede convocar a una asamblea constituyente para poner fin al régimen constitucional. Es una paradoja en la que la experiencia histórica nos ha revelado. Mencionemos por ejemplo, dos ejemplos históricos. Recurriendo a plebiscito, Napoleón Bonaparte, el primero, alejó a Francia de la República que apenas estaba naciendo y se convirtió en emperador. Su sobrino nieto, Napoleón III, en Francia, medio siglo después, convocó a un plebiscito para convertirse de presidente en emperador. Y la experiencia chilena, y con eso ya casi voy a concluir, querido Michael, la experiencia chilena nos da ejemplos contrastantes del uso de un mecanismo de democracia directa. En 1980, el general Pinochet todavía un dictador que había llegado al poder por medio de la fuerza, convocó a un plebiscito para refrendar la constitución diseñada por el gobierno militar. Y ese plebiscito lo ganó Pinochet y eso le permitió convertirse en presidente de la República. Sin embargo, 9 años después convocó a un plebiscito que le permitiría prorrogar su mandato como presidente, y este plebiscito lo perdió, y eso abrió el camino a la transición democrática de Chile, digamos, a la recuperación de la democracia chilena, de tal manera que los mecanismos de democracia directa pueden servir para cosas muy buenas de la democracia directa, perdón, del sistema democrático, pero también para cosas tan malas como acabar con la propia democracia. Gracias.
반갑습니다. 저는 대한민국 국회의원 김두관입니다. 남해 군수 시절, 행정자치부 장관 시절, 그리고 경남도지사 시절 직접 민주주의 구현을 위해서 노력한 점을 말씀드리겠습니다. 저는 이어리 농민회와 이장으로서 주민들과 밀착된 경험을 통해 정치에 입문을 했습니다. 대의제가 주권자가 겉도는 것에 대해 늘 경계할 필요가 있다고 생각을 했습니다. 남해 군수 시절 민원공개법정 제도를 만들어 주민 참여를 제도화했고 주요 정책에 대한 갈등 조정의 방안으로 널리 활용을 했습니다. 행정자치부 장관 시절 시기상조라는 우려에도 불구하고 주민투표제를 도입했으며 현재까지 33건의 주민투표가 이루어졌습니다. 경남도지사 시절 도정에서 직접 민주주의를 구현한 사례는 없지만 여소야대 상황에서 진보 대연정을 통해 정책을 추진했고 주민들의 의사를 반영하려고 많은 노력을 해왔습니다.
I'm going to translate what he's been talking about. Now, I am Kim Dugan. I'm a member of the National Assembly of South Korea. And I've been serving as a governor of Namhae-gun County and the Minister of the Government Administration and Homeland Affairs for central government, and also the governor of Gangnam-do Province. And I'm going to share with you the policies or systems that I've introduced to enhance the direct democracy. So I actually started my political career as a foreman of this small village called Iori. And I had, from that experience, I had established a very close relationship with the residents there. And from their experience also, I would like to ask you to think about, we have to be all aware of the dangers or shortcomings of the representative democracies. That is, selected leaders and the people who has a voting rights sometimes not on the same page, and they are not looking the same directions. And the leaders are alienated from their voting rights, people with the voting rights. That is the danger of the representative democracy, and I would like to mention. And during the governor of Namhae-gun County, I was working, that I established a public participation trial system. And with the systems, I kind of promoting the resident participation into the administrations. And also I use that system as a tool to mediate the conflicts over the major policies of the Namhae-gun. And when I was working as a Minister of Government Administration, then I introduced a referendum system despite a lot of concern about whether this is too early. And anyway, we went and we introduced the referendum system, and so far we had 33 cases of national referendum so far. And while I was working as a governor of the Gyeongnam province, that I don't have exact examples that I've introduced to enhance the direct democracy, but I try to reflect the opinion of the residents of the Gyeongnam province by promoting the policies through the progressive coalitions between the opposite and pro parties. That's what I've been done.
국회 참여민주주의 입법 방향에 대해서 좀 말씀드리겠습니다. 정치권의 기득권을 강화하는 법률과 정책에 대한 국민들의 직접 감시의 필요성이 저는 있다고 보고 있고요. 주민투표제와 주민소환제, 국민참여재판과 참여예산제가 좀 더 접근 가능하고 실질적인 수준에 이르도록 개선할 필요가 있다고 생각을 합니다. 주민소환제는 서명인수 요건을 완화하고 투표율 기준도 유권자 3분의 1 이상에서 4분의 1로 낮추고 연령도 19세에서 18세로 하향 추진 중에 있습니다. 2008년 국민참여재판 도입을 했고 2014년 국민참여재판 시행 건수가 전국적으로 45%에 이르렀지만 이후 꾸준히 하락한 데다가 코로나19로 시행 건수가 급격히 줄었습니다. 필수적 대상 사건을 도입하거나 지방법원의 국민참여재판 관할 확대가 논의되고 있습니다. 주민참여예산제는 2004년 참여정부에서 권고를 했고 그러나 기존 주민자치조직과 연계가 미비하여 자치조직이 축적해온 지역 현안 정보를 제대로 활용하지 못하는 실정이 있어서 전체 예산 대비 비중이 매우 적어서 좀 아쉽습니다.
And I would like to introduce also the National Assembly of South Korea's legislation direction toward the participatory democracy. First, I think we need to have a direct monitoring system which allows citizens to monitor laws and policies that can reinforce the vested rights of the political groups. That's, I think, we need. And then there are referendum systems and citizen recall election systems and citizen participatory trial systems or participatory budget systems. These are the systems that we try to introduce or are introducing it. And the system has to be improved to be more accessible and to be more practical in real realities. And about the recall election systems, we need to ease the requirements for the number of signatory voters, and to also we need to lower the turnout standard from current third of voters to a quarter. And also age, we need to lower the age from 19 to 18, and which is undergoing now. And then about the public participatory trial system, which was introduced in year 2008. And then the number of cases of public participatory trial reached peak in year 2014 at 271 cases. However, the number has been decreasing. So last year it was only 84 cases. So we try to discussing now how to expand this system. So one way will be let the local court also use the systems. And also the other one is that we can designate as special cases that has to go through the public participatory trials. So these are the directions that we are thinking about now. And about the participatory budget system, which is not very successful so far because it was recommended by the government in the year 2004 and it was introduced. However, there was a citizen group, autonomous groups that can lead these systems, and the link between these groups and the government planning department was very weak. So actually it was not going very well. So currently, out of the 100% budgets, the budget that was established through this system is only 0.43%, which is very, very low. So we have to find some way to reinforce this.
지난 대선에서 민주당 경선 후보로 뛰면서 1% 법안 국민투표제를 제안한 바 있습니다. 합의가 매우 불가능한 쟁점 사항이라든가 국민의 삶에 큰 영향을 미치는 사안에 대해서 국민투표를 활성화하는 방안입니다. 대한민국 헌법은 제72조와 130조 2항에 국민투표를 규정하고 있습니다. 헌법 개정에 관한 사항은 여러 차례 국민투표가 이루어졌지만 주요 정책에 대해서는 국민투표가 이루어진 적이 없는데 이를 법률에 구체하여 활용하는 방안을 적극적으로 검토할 생각입니다.
Last year we had presidential elections, and I was running as a Democratic Party's prime candidate. And while doing this campaign period, I proposed a recommended system for 1% bill. That is, it is a plan or a policy that activates a referendum automatically on issues that cannot be agreed upon because there's diverse interest, or the issues that has a greater, very important influence on the people's lives. And our constitution stipulates the referendum, but there were several referendums for the amendment of the constitutions, however, not for these normal policies or major policies. So currently it is possible to review the ways to incorporate these things into the law and how to utilize that the constitutions to real systems, real actual life.
Great. Thank you so much. Do we have our remote participants? No? No? All right, we will continue then. So I heard a lot of important things here in that first round. Starting out with the idea that people are smart, but systems can be manipulated, which is what I heard from Professor Jackowitz. And so when is direct democracy going to be favorable for increasing people power and overcoming autocracy? We heard from Professor Lowe that it is the most effective when it is out of the reach of political elites. So it is very important to protect the people and their participatory systems from the interests of power politics. I heard from Consigliero Velasquez that direct democracy cannot exist by itself, but that it needs to be the complement to very strong representative democracy, and that both representative democracy and direct democracy really need each other in order to thrive. And finally, I heard from Assemblymember Kim some excellent examples of how representative democracy and direct democracy can work hand in hand and therefore prevent the rise of autocracy. Lots of great information in there, but some examples were citizen monitoring of what the representative democracy is doing, increasing participation in political parties, and making sure to consult with the people on specific issues that are extremely important to their lives. So I definitely heard we didn't plan this ahead of time, but I heard a very coherent narrative and a very complementary set of observations from the different members of the panel. So in our remaining time, I would like to ask the panelists to briefly comment a little bit further. Let's take it one level deeper and answer the question that we've begun to answer, which is what are the characteristics of direct democracy that will make it easier for autocrats to manipulate, versus how can we set up direct democracy that makes it harder for autocrats to manipulate? Let's come together as international leaders to figure out how to deal with this tremendous challenge. And if we could keep our remarks relatively brief, I would like to bring in some questions from the audience after this. So we'll start with you, Professor Jackowitz.
Okay, thank you. I think it's not such an easy question as it maybe looks like. And I think the main purpose, the main target, and the key feature of the answer is to keep the politicians out of direct democracy. And how to do it? I think the most important thing is judicial control. The first condition is giving the people the possibility to decide to launch the direct democracy without consent of any political body. For example, collect the signatures and the direct democracy starts without consent of anybody else. This is the first feature, the first condition. The second one is judicial control to prevent instrumental use of direct democracy by the politicians. For example, to check if the questions are permissible, to not use the questions in instrumental way. And the third condition is a binding nature of the result of the direct democracy. Binding nature, I don't think just about the in a field of law. I'm thinking about some mechanism that, for example, responsibility of the authorities that are in the charge of applying the issues discussed in a given form of direct democracy. If we have some mechanism to execute the results of the direct democracy, it could be effective. Because if we don't have any control about that, if we don't any responsibility about that, the people can decide, the people can be consulted, the people can give opinions. But if the politicians are after these opinions, if politicians still control the decisions, these opinions could be manipulated, it could be annihilated. So the law is about to give some model, give some circumstances. I'm talking about because I'm a constitutional lawyer. And I know the constitutional law is not everything. We can have the best constitutional law we can imagine, but the life is such more complicated, much more sophisticated. So I'm aware that constitutional law is not enough. The second platform, the second field are the people. People that are aware of their rights. And the people who want to live in a democracy. If we have authoritarians, if we have autocracy, we can have a best constitutional law. It doesn't help them. The most spectacular example I can give you is the Russia democracy. Of course, democracy. The constitution gives a quite good semi-presidential system of democracy. But how it works, we know. It's not the democracy, of course. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you said, it's not an easy question, but we didn't bring such impressive, intelligent people here from around the world to ask them easy questions, and I thought that was an excellent answer. Dr. Loh.
Yeah, I want to just complicate the picture a bit more. And I want to share with you some of the discourse on the future of democracy that actually took place in our Asian context, and especially after Korea became a democracy. So we identified, yes, there's liberal democracy, very important, checks and balances, elections, multi-parties, and so on and so forth. But that's one kind of democracy. We also identified social democracy. You know, the whole idea of the welfare state. You know, and it seems to a concept that has been forgotten in Europe as we talk about direct democracy and all that. Very important. Third, the unions were very much a part of the whole people's movement. and they insisted, what about economic democracy? You know, what about better salaries for us? What about our rights in the working space? You know, and then the women folk told us, gender equality is a huge problem. The minorities told us, the mindset of the majority people, they keep forgetting, bullying, ill-treating the minorities. So this is cultural democracy. Most difficult to change, perhaps. And the last, of course, is a global democracy. We lack a global democracy. You know, things are so unfair at a global level. When are we going to address that issue? How do you relate it all back to direct democracy? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much for the reminder that our direct democracy is about more than our political systems. You can create the perfect political system, but if you don't have cultural democracy, social democracy, economic democracy, the majority can become its own form of autocrat. Consigliere Velázquez.
Gracias. ¿Cuándo los mecanismos de democracia directa pueden incrementar el poder de la gente en la vida pública? Pues en primer lugar, cuando los ciudadanos desean participar en los asuntos públicos, cuando tienen libertad para hacerlo y cuando existen en las instituciones reglas claras para garantizar que, por un lado, los ciudadanos tengan información suficiente y condiciones para participar en libertad y con su voto efectivo. Pero además, cuando haya instituciones democráticas de la democracia representativa fuertes y eficaces para que los mecanismos de democracia directa no faciliten la manipulación. Y entonces paso a la segunda pregunta: ¿cuándo la democracia directa puede ser manipulada? Pues en buena medida cuando la democracia es débil y cuando los mecanismos de participación ciudadana pueden ser manipulados desde el poder, tanto por los políticos profesionales, como dice Andrei, como directamente desde el gobierno. Y voy a ilustrar rápidamente el caso con un ejemplo mexicano. En México, los mecanismos de democracia directa son muy recientes, tienen unos cuantos años. Y el año pasado se promovió un mecanismo llamado revocación de mandato, es decir, la oportunidad para que el pueblo que elige al presidente pueda el pueblo decidir retirar al presidente. De hecho, hacerlo renunciar. Suena bien, a mí, confieso que a mí nunca me gustó ese mecanismo porque crea un estado de inestabilidad, de incertidumbre en cuanto a la duración de los gobiernos, pero además crea incentivos perversos para que el gobernante se preocupe más por conservarse en el poder que por tener gobiernos eficaces. Pero haciendo a un lado esto, hay que mencionar el caso de la experiencia mexicana en cuanto a la revocación de mandato. ¿Quiénes promovieron la revocación de mandato? ¿Quiénes llamaron a una consulta para que el pueblo dijera queremos que se acabe anticipadamente el periodo del presidente? Lo promovió el presidente mismo. ¿Con qué apoyo? Con el apoyo de su partido, de su mayoría parlamentaria y con muchos recursos, algunos de dudosa legalidad, para promover la participación ciudadana. ¿Qué ocurrió con este plebiscito o consulta de revocación de mandato? Los más interesados, casi los únicos interesados en participar, fueron los que apoyaban al presidente, no los que no lo apoyan. El resultado fue que votaron solamente alrededor de 15-16% de los ciudadanos y el 90% de ellos votaron a favor de la continuación del presidente en el poder. Es una manera llena de paradojas, pero que tiene una explicación sobre mecanismos claramente manipulados. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Sir?
제가 개인적으로 생각하는 민주주의 가장 완성은 대의민주주의와 직접민주주의의 융합이라고 저는 개인적으로 생각을 합니다.
The democracy that I think that the most complete version of democracy is the mix of representative democracy and direct democracy.
우리 한국은 오랜 군부 독재를 이제 우리 국민들이 민주화를 통해서 민주화를 완성을 했고 그 민주화의 완성의 결과가 세계 10여 경제대국, 국군사력은 세계 6위, 수출 규모는 세계 6위 제7위를 달성했던 밑거름이라고 생각을 합니다.
Also, the Korean people's experience that we eradicate the military dictatorships, and that became a base for our economic success. Now we reach the 10th biggest economies in the world, and in terms of exports, it's 6th greatest in the world. And these are only possible because we was successfully eradicate this military dictatorship.
1987년 민주화 대투쟁 그리고 2016년 촛불 시민혁명을 통해서 정치적 민주주의를 완성하고 한국은 사회경제적 민주주의로 나아가야 한다라고 생각을 했는데 사실은 또 그 혁명과 반혁명이 있듯이 민주주의의 반동이 있어가지고 이게 순서가 정치적 민주주의, 사회경제적 민주주의 완성으로 가는 것이 아니라 정치적 민주주의도 오히려 정권의 성격에 따라서 후퇴하는 걸 보면서 민주주의를 지키기 위해서는 부단히 노력하고 투쟁해야만 민주주의를 지킬 수 있다 이렇게 생각을 합니다.
And from 1987, that we had a great fight, and there was created 87 regime, and also we had candlelight revolutions in year 2014 to 16 period. And through these, we thought that we kind of accomplished the political democracies, and we wanted to move on to the social democratic part. However, because of this presidential elections results, then types of government that we have, that political democracy is going backwards a little or forward a little. Now that's our system. So from that experience, what I can feel is that democracy is not something that you just accomplish and then stop there, but you still have to fight, constantly fight for it. Then that is the process of that is the democracy.
지방자치와 민주주의 국제연대 우리 같으면 이제 참여 민주주의 국제연대 이런 게 굉장히 중요하다고 생각을 합니다.
Also, I think that international liaison, international link, and also the decentralization of the power to the local government are the most important things for the direct democracy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I heard quite a lot of, so Professor Jackowitz, you had some very good sort of systematic proposals, right, about how you want to design direct democracy to avoid autocracy. But a lot of what I heard from the rest of the panel was complementary to that. We have a political analyst in the United States who's a little problematic called Andrew Breitbart, but he had a very good comment, which is that politics is downstream of culture, right? If you don't have a culture of political participation, if you don't have an engaged populace, Consigliero Velasquez, you mentioned when you only have the people who support the president coming out to vote for the referendas that the president puts on the ballot, that's a problem. And you can't design a perfect political system that overcomes the lack of a broad engagement in democracy and all of the other types of democracy that came up here. So what I'd like to do in the balance of our time, and I think Joe told me we have about 20 more minutes, is I would like to turn to you, the audience, for questions. I would like to ask you to address your questions to one of the panelists, because otherwise we will only answer one question. I don't know if we have another microphone, but I'm just going to do the Phil Donahue thing. And that is probably a reference that one person, Feinstein, got, and pass it around.
Okay, I have two questions. I have to select one, or I can do. Okay, yeah, I select one. I would like to know how ended the Polish case you commented before, because I have been doing research on referendums and initiatives for a long time. And in our data set, the only two cases we have in which referendums played a role in opening democracies, in transitions to democracies, are the Chilean case, 1988, mentioned before, and the Uruguayan case, 1980. And in the two cases, I mean, first, it's important to consider, I think, that in this period, there were many transitions to democracy without referendums. And if you think in Chile, in 1980, the control Pinochet had on the whole system was very closed. While in 1998, there was international pressure, the regime was weakened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So my personal argument on that is that referendums don't play a role against autocracies, and what does play a role is civil society organization, mobilization, et cetera, and maybe the referendum a tool to express that. But without referendums, we have transitions too.
And you want to hear more about the Polish experience. Professor Jakowicz.
Okay, so I will make it brief. The first case I mentioned about this communist referendum, it ended in a way of falsifying it. There were some officers from Moscow, special force, I can think, and they work hard, falsify millions of cards, and the results were spectacular. 98% voting for yes, 3 times yes. And now we know that it was all falsified. It was about 15–20% voting for yes. So the nation votes no to the communists. But they don't care about that. They struggle for power using terror, administrative, persuasive measures, and they take power in Poland anyway. And the second case about this presidential elections, 2015, and this referendum announced by the president before the second round of the elections, the president has lost. So the electors, the voters, they weren't manipulated. I think it was against this president. So there was a lesson for him, lesson of democracy, you think? Thank you for this question.
So part of what I'm hearing from you is it's very uncommon for referendas to be the tool of direct democracy, but it does happen. Let me get a question from the only person to get my Phil Donahue reference.
And I'm going to just ask whomever of you feels most interested in answering. None of you spoke about the role of social media and how it affects direct democracy. in the United States, we had the Russians being involved in our presidential election in 2016 and involved in the UK with Brexit. So my question is both the role of social media and, as a counterpoint, the role of publicly financed media to provide a source of information separate from disinformation and big money.
That is an awesome question, and I'm glad. Yeah. Do you want to answer it? Maybe another.
No. I had the chance to answer one question, so I can pass my
Okay.
mic.
Would anybody like to talk about the influence of social media on this?
Seré muy breve. Las redes sociales han multiplicado las formas de comunicarse en la sociedad y desde ese punto de vista puede ampliar las libertades. Sin embargo, las redes sociales están produciendo también una suerte de aislamiento y de ficción. Muchas personas sienten que se comunican con mucha gente y en realidad dejan de hacerlo en la vida real y crean la ficción de estar participando en la vida pública y en realidad solo hablan con su espejo, es decir, con los que piensan igual que él. Nada más, gracias.
Yes. Social media is, speaking as the parent of a teenager, social media is deeply problematic.
I just quick intervention to my beloved friend Francis Lowe, because you conceptualized the representative power, so elitist power as a grand P, and the people's power as a small p. But when we conceptualize ourselves, we should be very purposefully, why should we pin down ourselves as a small p? I thought the grassroots people's voices should be grand P. So how do you think about my suggestion?
Yeah, for me it's very straightforward. I was just trying to make a clear distinction between big P, power, procedural, professionalized politics, and then the other kind of politics which is more our type of politics. Like Jun Ok and I were involved in something called the People's Plan for the 21st Century for Asian countries. It was an idea grounded, coming up from the bottom. And we proposed that actually we do X, Y, Z. So that's all I was trying to suggest. But I agree with you, if this is what you're trying to say. At the end of the day, it's big P politics that make big decisions. And small P politics, people-oriented causes and all that, you can be stuck in the doldrums forever and ever. That's my experience. I'm stuck there. But so I'm just saying you must meet somewhere. And my own experience being an activist is that one good place where you can meet is actually at local government level. It's procedural, you deliver, there's a budget, there's money you can tap into, which you can make use of. And yet actually, a lot of the big P politicians are not so interested in that realm of politics. And we can have a chance of survival. Yeah.
Excellent. Sir.
Yeah, I have a question on the rules of direct democracy, because this whole workshop is about how can it help the autocrats to bring on their issues or to bring out the issues of the people. And the way to come to decisions, this is the important thing. Because you're a constitutional expert, but everyone is an expert on constitution and law here, I can see. But to my mind, the main problem is who writes the rules, especially on direct democracy. Because first of all, many direct democracy rules and participation rules are not codified at all. They are somewhere flying around, but they can be changed from case to case. And this is very easy to misuse. And second, even if it is codified, the people in power and the officials and the advocates of the people in power write down the rules. So how can we bring in the ideas of the people in changing the rules for direct democracy? And again, whoever feels best to answer it, yeah.
Somebody like to respond to that?
I can try. Direct democracy is something I consider as a threat to the authorities. Politicians as authorities, they know, they think, they always know better. And if you make a space for a people to decide on some matters, you take some issue out of the politician's space. You give this issue to the people. And if we think about who is capable to write the rule for direct democracy, are the authorities that we are taking space, are they interested in giving effective direct democracy forms to the people? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's why these problems about the collecting signatures, about binding form, binding character of the results, all these problems, all these disadvantages are really the advantages for the authoritarians, are for the politicians, not for the people. So I think how to change it? To put the pressure, constant pressure. I think it's the only way. The constant pressure, what we saw on Sunday at the streets of Mexico, is some kind of pressure. The politicians in democracy, they need to win the elections. So there is a space to collect some votes from the streets, to promise people sharing a power. Then we can have a hope that these politicians we elected, that maybe they can share. Maybe they can share, maybe not, I don't know.
But you need to utilize one of the most primary aspects of direct democracy, which is pressure from the streets. It was very interesting. I stayed at the Grand Hotel earlier this week. So I got to see from my hotel room a very excellent example of direct democracy in action. So that was very exciting. Did not plan that, but I'm glad that it worked out. Does Mr. Kim want to speak? No? See?
국민 참여 민주주의를 어떻게 확대할 것인가 법으로 이렇게 질문을 해주셨는데, 저는 국정을 책임지고 있는 최고 책임자인 대통령제에서 대통령과 여당의 그 철학의 문제라고 그렇게 보고 있고요. 또 국민들을 통치의 대상으로 보느냐 아니면 섬김의 대상으로 보느냐의 철학의 차이에 있어서 문제라고 저는 그렇게 보고 있습니다.
But I think about the questions, then the direct democracy that is based on the people's participation, then if we want to expand that, then we have to have a right leader. So it really depends on, I think it depends on the philosophy of the president, if it's in a president systems and country. And the philosophy that is, that whether he sees the people, citizen, as a subject to his power, or are they the one who have to serve? So based on that philosophy, then direct the expansion of the direct democracy is possible or not?
Yeah, I think that's a very astute answer. I mean, ultimately, sometimes we get lucky with political leaders. And sometimes, speaking as somebody who lives in the United States, starting in 2016, we get very unlucky with political leaders. Yeah, and other countries have experienced that too, but it's only really my role to speak of the United States. Yeah, ma'am.
I would like to ask maybe Professor Velasquez from Mexico. I will not ask my Polish colleague. And I just wonder, because the panel is about autocracy, about the direct democracy, and is it something that can go together? Because we talk about guarantees, but in an autocratic country, you do not have independent institutions. So Poland is not an autocracy now, but even in the liberal democracy, constitutional court is subject to the government. So, okay, we can put into law a lot of guarantees, formal requirements to make a constitutional review of the questions, but it doesn't work because they will say just yes, they are constitutional. So in my opinion, it's just people and powers and people. You gave this example from Asia and from Mexico. In Poland, 1989, yes, that was the same. People went out to overcome the communist regime. So is it, can you imagine any formal guarantees of direct democracy, of people's power in autocracy?
En México tenemos un sistema democrático joven aún y un sistema electoral que se construyó en 20 años y que ha demostrado su fortaleza y su capacidad profesional. De tal manera que algunas garantías, y yo diría las principales, sí son fuertes y creo que permitirán que los problemas sobre la legislación electoral que hoy se discuten en México puedan ser resueltos por una vía institucional. Algunos mecanismos de democracia directa en México por lo menos tienen la garantía de que los votos se cuentan bien, y eso no es poca cosa. Y también podemos esperar que la Suprema Corte de Justicia resuelva el diferendo que hay hoy en México sobre la legalidad y el carácter democrático o no de las reformas electorales recientemente aprobadas. Creo que hay que confiar en nuestras instituciones y creo que por esa vía México va a conservar su democracia y aún puede fortalecerla.
I certainly hope so. Other questions? Let me get back here on the other side.
Hi. Yeah, thank you. I have a question because to Mr. Jamie Rivera Velasquez, I hope I get it right, because you were talking about the very bad example of the recall election of your president. And my question is, are you totally against recall elections, or if they have a good legal design, could they maybe be good against corruption? Because we had this case in Germany. In some of our states, we have recall elections for mayors, and from the famous city of Frankfurt, the mayor Feldman was recalled because of corruption. So do you think that a good legal design could be an option to fight against corruption?
Se refiere a las, quizás no entendí muy bien, ¿se refiere a la parte del voto electrónico? No. Perdón. Ya, sí, es que... Sí. A ver, personalmente creo que la revocación de mandato debería usarse solo en casos extremos. No creo que sean muy saludables para la normalidad democrática. Pero si existen, deben tener buenas reglas. Y yo pienso que en la experiencia reciente de México se demostraron que las reglas fueron imperfectas, pero no tan malas. La gente que quiso participar votó y sus votos se contaron bien y reflejaron lo que la gente votó. Otra cuestión, pero que incluso rebasa las facultades de la autoridad electoral, es si fue bien concebido e impulsado ese mecanismo. Mencioné yo paradojas o francas contradicciones y que hablan de que no fue un ejercicio de participación de democracia directa que debiéramos tomar como ejemplo a seguir. Definitivamente no. Y aprovecho, si me permite, que estoy de acuerdo en que el plebiscito de 1988 en Chile se realizó en condiciones muy imperfectas, bueno, bajo control autoritario todavía, pero es una rareza porque la gente votó y cambió el curso de los acontecimientos, y esa rareza hay que celebrarla. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Yes. Well, I would now like to allow the panelists to share some final thoughts. This has been an extraordinarily rich conversation, one of the best panels that I've ever listened to, in spite of the fact that we have people speaking in different languages, we have people coming from different countries. It's been truly wonderful. So we have about 5 more minutes. If folks have a final thought they want to leave the audience with on how we can protect ourselves from autocracy through direct democracy or through reforming direct democracy, I just invite you to share them with the audience.
There were so many issues covered by this panel. I don't know how to start. Maybe the first thing coming to my mind is about this revocatoria, about this recall. I think we need it, definitely. As during the opening session, Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "Don't trust the politicians." I fully agree with that. And as much procedures to control the politicians we can afford, we should. And direct democracy is something I consider in this field as a part of modifying, as a part of interfering the politicians. But what I'm aware of after this panel, the constitutional law is, as a constitutional lawyer, I'm not competent about talking about direct democracy. There are so many issues not connected with the constitutional law. Constitutional law is just the first step into the direct democracy. There are so many details. There are so many even technical details. How to apply the direct democracy, how to consider it effective. I have to learn a lot.
All right, that's excellent.
Very quickly, it's just for me, I got schooled in America in the 70s. And one of the authors that we all had to read in that time was C.B. Macpherson's The Real World of Democracy. Regardless, whatever, you had to read that book. He was the professor of philosophy, a philosopher himself, in University of Toronto. And that book talked about the real world of democracy, implying there was the liberal democracy, but that's not all that there is. There's actually social democracy. And the last point he said was, in the third world, the emerging country, there is populism. It's a really horrible word today, but he was referring to the solidarity, that communitarianism that existed in developing countries which had been involved in the anti-colonial struggle. And that was an aspect of democracy that you must recapture. And I fear, personally, speaking for myself, that direct democracy, liberal democracy, overemphasizes the role of the individual. The community, the other gender, minorities are too often forgotten.
짧은 시간이었지만 다른 나라 직접 민주주의 사례를 볼 수 있어서 참 다행스럽고요. 아까 이제 SNS가 선거에 미치는 영향에 대해서 질문을 해주셨는데, 대한민국은 이제 인터넷 강국이라서 그 2002년 대선에서는 인터넷이 굉장히 대선 결과에 굉장히 영향을 미쳤고, 그 이후에 2012년 또 2016년, 2022년 대선에서 결정적으로 페이스북이나 또 직접민주주의 또 다른 미디어, 뉴미디어를 통한 직접민주주의 발행 차원의 유튜브 이런 게 굉장히 영향을 미쳐서 다른 나라에 비해서는 어쨌든 뉴미디어인 유튜브, 페이스북을 통해서도 선거의 직접민주주의가 약간 발현되는 그런 현상을 대한민국에서 볼 수 있었습니다.
It was a good chance to listen to other countries' story. It was very interesting. And one thing that I wanted to add about the SNS, the questions, that because SNS, Korea is a very tech-savvy country, that SNS is quite prevalent. And it played a very, very important role in the presidential elections in year 2002 to year 2012, 16, 22, a lot. And last election that we had, it was year 2022, that not SNS, but YouTube and other new media plays greater roles in good or bad ways. So I want to point out that also.
Excellent. Well, so much has been said in this panel. I want to pull out one little thing. And that one little thing is we've been talking about national democracy a lot, but it was also brought up in the panel that local democracy is important, and so is international democracy. All of us, no matter what country we're from, deal with the threat of autocracy. And all of us, therefore, can help protect each other from autocracy through the sort of international community that we create in events like these. So thank you so much to all of you, to the members of the panel, for being a part of this thoughtful, passionate international community. It has been a true honor to share the stage with you, and please welcome, thank the panel with me.